How should we handle the Tampa Bay Rays pitcher staff? And why 2021 is such a unique challenge to analyze. We have Nick Pollack of Pitcher List here for part 2 of our starting pitcher preview. Next on Beat the Shift. Welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and with me as always, Ruvain Guy. How are you, Ruvain?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. You know, pitchers and catchers now just a couple of days away. Can you believe that?
Yes, 1 week away. I know the Mets and Yankees are both reporting in 1 week, and the schedules actually came out, and, you know, you can take a look, see when your teams are playing. Hopefully they'll start on time, and we'll have a full season.
Yeah, I've never been to a spring training, but my wife had been taking my kids a couple times in a row, and that was just fantastic, where they got to just talk right up to the players. I guess that won't happen this year, so that's a little bit sad, but nice to know that things are back.
Yes.
Otherwise, how are you doing, Ruvain, all right?
I'm doing great, dealing with the snow and thinking warm. That's all.
Yeah. All right, well, we've got a great guest tonight. He is from Pitcher List. You all know him, Nick Pollack. Welcome to the show.
What is happening? Oh, it's so great to be here, and so great to talk to you guys again.
Our pleasure for having you back. What's doing? You're a New Yorker. How's your dealing with the snow and a little bit of snow in the Northeast in February?
Oh yeah. So I haven't had the opportunity to go out and really enjoy it much. I have been toiling away at 6.0 that is coming out on Tuesday. So there's that plug. Let's just get it out right away.
Want to give a little preview of what's going on there at Pitcher List right now?
Every year we do our new launch of the site. And this year, I don't want to spoil it, but we are making a significant shift as to what we do at the site. And it's only an addition. Don't worry, we're offering a lot of new things. It's taken a lot of work to create this, and we cannot wait to show you. So that comes out at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, February 16th. Cannot wait. And hey, Ariel, 2 days later, I get to hang out with you at PitchCon.
Yeah.
I can't wait for that.
Oh, you want to tell everybody what that's all about?
Sure, why not? 4-day baseball conference online, all streamed on twitch.tv/pitcherlist. We're raising money for Feeding America. Half of everything we raise goes straight to them. And it's 44 hours of everybody from the industry just talking about baseball. We're going to have things like a graphics competition across our graphics team. We're going to have you're going to do a great panel with Ron Chandler and Derek Carty and Rudy Gamble about projection systems. We have all this stuff, Rob Freeman, Foolish Baseball, MLB Random Stats, and John Boy and Jake. I mean, it's going to be great for 4 straight days, 11 to 10. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, starting on the 18th of February. So this is what I've been working on for the past month and change. So I just got to peer out the window looking at that snow like an old curmudgeon at the age of 32.
Nice. Well, I was a part of that last year, and I got to tell you, that was one heck of a conference. And I guess you'll post, just everyone follow Nick Pollack if you don't already, and you'll get details of that, and take a look and take a watch. You won't be disappointed.
You had a great presentation last year.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, and I got good placement. It was the one right after yours, right? I got a good lead.
There we go. I needed to keep them. I peppered them up for you.
There you
go.
go.
And you had the. It was ATC projections. Like, who doesn't want to know what's in the recipe there? That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, we're not going to talk a lot about it today, but do check out the article that I just dropped today on interprojection volatility. Now ATC doesn't only come with projections; they come with how volatile a player is, talking about the parameter risk, the skewness of a player, the volatility of a player, everything you'll understand by reading the article. It's a biggie, so check that out on Fangraphs today. But we're going to go right into our strategy section here, and since we have the Pitcher List guy himself, we're going to talk about pitching. And the first question I want to ask you that really goes to the heart of time and preparation and what is important to do and what is not important to do. You know a lot about the heavy analytics that goes on with pitchers. We have guys who are just throwing fantastic articles about spin rate and
Oh yeah.
contact off the bat, and there's a lot of very very advanced concepts. And my question is, for the average person out there who's listening to the show, how worth it is it for them to really get into the deep diving as opposed to just looking at simple metrics? Like, is it worth somebody's time, or is it something that they should be doing themselves, or just reading others? Like, what do you think about heavy analytics and how it applies to the average person?
That's a great question. I'm gonna say no. Don't worry about it. You're getting intimidated by this stuff. Look, even me, I see some of these things, and at first I go, "Oh my god, am I undervaluing this guy because I don't recognize, his spin efficiency on his curveball? Like, should I be thinking about it again?" But I think many of us in the industry will also tell you we have such a cornucopia of information now that it's really hard for us to understand which, what we should pull from it, what we should be eating from it, right? And I would say if you just get familiar with the basic sabermetrics, say like K minus walk rate, that is one of the best indications of success, bar none. All those extra little bits, they help us get an understanding of how they do what they do, but often those are expressed in other metrics, and you don't really need to focus on it. I mean, good example that I have is Chris Paddock last year was not as good. I mean, I don't think, you don't need me much to tell you that, yeah, he wasn't very good, right? And it was very disappointing for your fantasy teams. But when you looked into it, we saw, his fastball was not performing well. Okay. Why wasn't it performing well? There's the idea that it was off its spin axis, and that means that he wasn't essentially getting the same amount of rise that he normally was, and that means he does not get the same swing strikes, and they're hitting it cleaner. That's fine. But if you just see the fact that his fastball is allowing more hits and not as missing as many bats, it doesn't matter all the exact reasons why those numbers are there, but just that they're there, right? So you don't need to get bogged down in all the incredibly minute details of every single pitch. But I will say that, there are like three levels of understanding these metrics, right? There's the shallow ones, which is just like your BABIP and your home run per nine and your whip. Then you have the actual pitch level stuff, where if you look at the individual pitches on their own, they will tell you a much better story. Oh, he only has 2 pitches, and really only one of them does he miss bats on, and he's kind of inconsistent with that. Oh, he has 4 pitches, and when one isn't working, he can throw another one that's also going to earn me strikeouts or get outs in the field. That's really, really good. And if you understand that level, you don't need to know all of those intricacies of the actual chemistry of making a pitch work. So it can be intimidating. Trust me, I've been there myself. But if you just get to that second level, I think you'll be vastly rewarded. You don't need to trek farther than that.
So, do you think that there's a difference between looking at pitchers in season versus preseason? So, for example, you mentioned K minus BB, strikeouts minus walks,
Yes.
and for me, that's the first thing I look at, which really stabilizes very quickly in a season. But I feel that a lot of these metrics, it's hard to know what to do before the season. Like, what did a guy do last year? But once you see how a guy is performing this year and how close he is to his normal profile, or if he's better or not, that's a big indication. So, for example, if I see like a change in velocity, guy is all of a sudden, the first 3 games, he's up 3 miles an hour on his pitches. Whoa, that's a huge indication. But that's not something I could tell before the season starts. Or I'll look at his ground ball to fly ball to line drive profile, and I say, wait a minute, this guy is getting more ground balls this year. That sort of interests me. I find that there's a number of quick, not that deep statistics that you can get very much in season, but I find that a lot of the more advanced ones are more helpful in a preseason evaluation. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, I think so. You're talking to the right person about like in-season decisions. That is what, oh man, it's the most fun thing, right? Because I do the SP Roundup. I write about every single starter every single day, right? That's just pretty much how I do this.
Right.
And I'm following what they're doing. I'm following their pitch changes. Was this curveball effective this start? Was it not? I see consistency on a game by game basis, sometimes on a at bat basis through the games. And that gives me so much more information. We're spending months and months and months preparing for essentially, I say, the first week of April, right? Because after that, or maybe really like the first 2 weeks of April, it's all like
Yep.
thrown away. We have all this new data. I mean, obviously there are some situations of, okay, we think this guy's going to rebound. He's not this bad. Of course not. It's not too quick to quit your studs after, a week or two. But we really get so much data. I mean, as you're saying, velocity increase. I mean, pitch usage. All of a sudden, he's throwing that changeup that he wasn't before, and he's getting the whiffs on it. There's a lot of those intricacies that really, really help in season. And I think you make a great point that, cool, in the off season, we can kind of sift through those narratives a bit easier when we see those giant, macro changes, right? And when he's getting, oh, wait, I didn't realize they increased the spin on his curveball by 300 RPM or whatever it is, right? I mean, that is a better indication that something might be sticky that may present itself quicker in the season, right? So I'm with you there. It's funny to me. And I kind of bank on this a lot because, I mean, that's in my whole pitching strategy, but that's another tangent, about like how you find talent in season. And if you draft accordingly, knowing that you're going to be able to find talent in season, then you can actually set yourself up for a more successful season.
Actually, you actually hit on the follow-up question that I want to ask you. How many innings into the season do you say, okay, you know what, this guy figured it out?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'd say there is no right answer because it's nuanced, right? There's certain guys that I inherently know are volatile, that I know that one start, good example, Spencer Turnbull last year. I've been saying for a while, Spencer Turnbull's sinker is not a good pitch, and it's frustrating because you can even see when he has success, it's when his fast four-seamer, he trusts it and does well. But when he doesn't, he goes sinker, he has just worse performances, right? First start of the year, no sinker. It was pretty much like a 5% sinker after throwing a 20, 30% before. I got really excited. Oh, and then he brought it back the next start, right? And then I learned my lesson. And there's certain players like that doesn't matter how many innings I get. I don't know if I'm going to be able to trust them. Now, if they're a veteran, though, if they have more of a track record of doing something opposite, and then all of a sudden there's something getting tweaked here, then I buy into it more. It is very much of a case by case. I can't just say how many innings. I can also say, like, look, if you just did something and had success with it, more often than not, they will continue doing the thing that they just had success with. The question then is, are they going to be in rhythm enough to trust that they can continue doing that? That is, no one's going to be able to get that right, but that's kind of the fun. You never know.
Right. I'll go to Ruvain first for this one. Talking about, qualitative off-season information. Like sometimes you get, hey, this pitcher has a new pitch. The pitcher bulked up in the off-season. He has a tweak in his delivery, that kind of thing. So for you, Ruvain, what things do you hear that you actually pay attention to, and what to you is just noise?
Well, first of all, for a pitcher who's been struggling or a pitcher who's been doing well and wants to improve their game, it's two different completely things. Well, Chris Archer, who just re-signed with Tampa, said he's going to eliminate his two-seam fastball. His two-seam fastball got crushed. And if he eliminates that, he may be back a little bit to more of the pitcher he was before the trade and everything like that. Then you have a pitcher like Lucas Giolito, who said he's going to use his curveball more. What will that mean? Is that going to mean he's going to get hit more? Is that going to mean he's going to use his fastball, which is great, even less? And then another thing is if a pitcher has two pitches and they said they're learning a third pitch, or they have three pitches and they're learning a fourth pitch. The question is, I would watch them during spring training because you're going to see them. They're going to try out a whole bunch of stuff. That's what spring training is for, and that's why a lot of these pitchers struggled and didn't do that well early last year because the spring training was very abbreviated. They didn't get to their normal groove. They didn't get a chance to try out these little tweaks that they're doing. And, these are things that you have to watch for and see if they're going to change during the course of spring training and then during the course of the season.
Nick, you want to add something to that?
Oh, man. I love that. Like, spring training is so important. I know we say, oh, stats in spring training, we need to ignore that stuff. No, but there are so many fantastic stories and things you can track that will affect the start of the year. And yeah, Chris Archer, man, everybody has forgotten about this. I did. I thought he would be missing more time. I didn't realize he'd be starting out of the gate, and I completely neglected him for ages. And now I'm kind of like, Chris Archer, why wouldn't I just take a shot and see what happens right out of the gate, right?
You're talking to the guy who never picks Chris Archer, you know.
Well, now is the time to do it when it costs
Chris
absolutely
Archer
nothing.
guy.
He costs nothing.
That's
Nothing.
true. That's true. That's true. Free is free.
Right?
It doesn't matter who. You can pick up a Nick Pollack in your league for free.
You could, but then you'd lose. So we know that answer.
Wouldn't get many strikeouts.
We don't know with Chris. Yeah, maybe I can get 0 strikeouts. All right. No, but spring training, yeah, we've seen increased velocity from guys before, and that can pay dividends. Man, I can't say it enough. John Means this past year in 2020, we saw essentially by the time he actually was in rhythm and had enough starts to be stretched out, he had 21 strikeouts in his final 2 starts, and he was throwing harder. And we knew he was throwing harder this time last year before everything shut down. And it's stuff like that you can really take out of spring training and apply it early in the season. So, yeah, I can't agree more. I really can't agree more than that.
Yeah, the two things that come to mind for me is, does a pitcher saying, I have a new pitch? That's always interesting to me. And velocity change. See what they do in spring training. I look at strikeouts in spring training, just even if it doesn't matter the result, but are they striking out batters? Very often you see a large increase in strikeouts in spring training, and it could. I mean, again, you're looking for players to think, should I give the jump? Should I bubble them up a little bit more? Just look at strikeouts in spring training. Why not, right? It's just there. Question for you, Nick. I'm a projection guy, obviously, and Alex Chamberlain wrote a nice article for Fangraphs a week ago talking about guys like Kyle Hendricks, and projections don't really predict Kyle Hendricks well. They always overestimate his ERA, and Chamberlain was, pointing out that, he might have induced weaker contact, or there's some things that pitchers have more control over, the elements that projections do not give credit for, right? Projections make things that seem random, whereas in fact, they do control, and that's why they can be better or worse. It goes the other way than any other pitcher. So the question is, what do you think about that? And are there certain elements that you think a pitcher does have control over that aren't in projections? And maybe a couple of names, if you even have, as to somebody you think that should be a little bit undervalued based on what ATC would say, let's say.
Okay, so the main problem with projections, and I'll be honest, Ariel, you do such an amazing job with them. I hate projections, and because I don't feel, maybe actually with what you introduced today, it'll tell a better story of the volatility and the ups and downs and kind of the range of cases, right? It doesn't tell the story of what it's like to be a fantasy manager for the entire year. Rostering that player, because we make this assumption that we get a guy and all of a sudden that's my stats for the year for this player, and we kind of forget, like, well, wait, if he's not doing well in April, am I going to keep the faith of this projection for the next 5 months to get that number? Probably not in many cases. Anyway, that's another ramble. There is no good stat for command. There just isn't. There's a control stat of walk percentage, and we like to think that weak contact is command, but there really isn't. There isn't this amazing statistic that outlines how good a pitcher is putting the ball where he wants with what kind of movement. And Kyle Hendricks is very good at that. And it doesn't surprise me at all that we see projection systems not like him because of that. Someone else that is undervalued, though, that's a great question. I'll be honest, I don't go after projection systems a lot. Like, for example, I'm putting out my top 200 starters on Tuesday, and I've tried my best to avoid as many rankings as possible so I'm not diluted or biased looking at others. So I don't have a great answer off the top of my head. I would think that a guy like Kershaw or maybe Patrick Corbin aren't getting recognized enough. For example, I'm throwing away Patrick Corbin's 2020 season for the most part, while Kershaw, I imagine there's an expectation of degradation that I don't necessarily think is going to happen. I think when I saw it, they're predicting Kershaw to have the worst season of his career by far, and I don't know if that's going to happen.
3.2 ERA, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay. Interesting. And interesting. You say you don't you hate projections. Of course, that's such
Yes,
a
I'm
strong
sorry.
word.
I'm
But well,
sorry.
no. Listen, we're here to debate, and we're here to get different ideas from different people. And just because I like projections doesn't mean everybody has to. And there are. I mean, the question I just asked you showed that there are a lot of elements that aren't going to be in project. You have to know what is in a projection and what you can get out of it. Right? There's information that is just not in there. That if you don't study, you won't get it. But when you make rankings, how do you come with that? Are you looking at historical numbers? Are you looking at some set of projections? Like how does that come together for you?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. Okay, I am going to pull back. I apologize. Should not have said hate. I have a tough.
Distrust.
I just you're right. They have to be used the right way, and the way that they're used the correct way, I think, is a foundation and a way to just kind of get yourself, settled, and you're able to then build off of and say, okay, I understand why it's saying that. Where do I disagree? I disagree with this. Okay, so then I'm going to say this, right? When I do my rankings, I actually I think for the first 60, for the top 60, I'm putting in a Knicks reluctant 2021 projections. I literally call them that, just to give everyone a baseline understanding of the player. But when I'm doing these rankings, it's a mixture of many factors. One is how much volume do I expect, which is like the hardest thing to understand and project properly. What is volume? There is so many different elements that go into how many innings a guy gets in a given year. I'm also trying to weigh in what his realistic ceiling and floor are. And what dictates that to me are these elements that are somewhat lost in projections. I mean, again, they get expressed, but I'm very much someone that tries to take the repertoire and see what they can and can't do with it. And just say, okay, I feel that this guy's going to take a step forward or step back, or kind of where he is at the moment. And that's kind of how I do my rankings. I go like that. I know that sounds so nebulous and vague.
No.
But I do root myself in creating that projection. If I look at that and say, that looks stupid, Nick, then all right, then I might change my rankings. That keeps me in check a bit.
Right. Of course, by you making rankings, you're inherently making, you're indirectly making a set of projections, right?
It's true, I guess so.
Right. You feel that there's a certain number of innings for a player and a certain upside and downside. And by the way, you alluded to this, that this volatility metrics I have actually cover some of the upside and downside in terms of parameter risk, and it actually defines the shape. It shows which pitchers all the projections agree on, which do projections go much further, so you get the range of up and down, but also I have the shape. I have the skewness in there. So for some pitchers, there's an average, but it skews up or it skews down, and so there's more projections up or down. How thick is the floor, right? So maybe that it is a step in the right direction that will make you love projections even more.
Well, okay, like them more is a very good way of saying.
I'm trying to balance you out, Nick.
I love it.
Okay, let's go to Ruben first in this one. We're talking about 2021, and with you have the short season, you have COVID going on, so 2021 just feels like a slightly different season. It's not like we're doing the same thing over and over and let's just find these guys. We have to account for a couple of different things that we didn't before. And some of it has to do with COVID, but some of it has to do with the fact that analytics are now being a larger part of what teams look at, and the game is changing itself. So let's talk a little bit about a few of these aspects that come up. One is, Ruvain, our team's going to go more to a 6-man rotation. That more has to do, I think, with COVID and the fact that we have a short season. But are you going to see more 6-man rotations, and how would that affect fantasy baseball?
I definitely think they're going to be more 6-man rotations, and a couple teams already mentioned they're going to do 6-man rotations. First of all, with a 6-man rotation, you're going to lower the total innings that each pitcher is going to have to pitch, which means their workload is going to be lower, which is what a lot of teams want, especially the younger pitchers, because a lot of these pitchers didn't pitch that many innings last year, and they don't want them to break down, and that's very important. Now, how that affects fantasy very important. There are less starts for each starter. The middle relievers get more time. There are less wins available for the starters. Less strikeouts should be into projections if they know you're going to have a six-man rotation. Like we mentioned in the podcast before, Shohei Ohtani, what is he going to be worth if he's pitching in six-man rotation? People value him as a pitcher, people value him as a hitter, but you don't know. There are going to be less two-star pitchers down the road also. So when you have to pick up pitchers on the waiver wire, you have to decide, you know what? A lot of these teams are not going to have two-star pitchers, and they're going to be few and far between. So you have to have a certain strategy to pick up these two-star pitchers. But the six-man rotation, I think, is going to happen for a lot of first of all, a lot of teams that are very deep. Like you have a team that like the Dodgers, they can definitely go with a six-man rotation. I know Trevor Bauer's not going to like that, but they can definitely go with it, and they'll have no issue with it whatsoever. But then you have a team like the Pirates, who right now, according to roster resources, Steven Brault is their number one. I mean, if that's their number one,
boy.
how are they going to
Mitch
have a
Keller.
six-man rotation? What are they doing? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Now, if there's another team like the Orioles, they want to see what they have. They want to bring up the pitchers, or the Tigers. They want to see what prospects they have. They're going to throw out those pitchers on a six-man rotation, and you know what? Those pitchers can, if they're not going to pitch the full 5 innings, 6 innings, they can still come in and throw them maybe on their day off and come in. You may see some weird things this year just because of the innings issues from last year.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a distinction between teams that are going for it and not going for it, and I think you'll see a more traditional 5-man rotation, other than maybe the Dodgers, for teams that are going for it. But I mean, who are we kidding me? With all the injuries, I mean, you, Ruvain, I can't. I don't have to remind you about injuries. I think that if teams even try to do it, you're going to see injuries pop up, and they're going to force back to a 5-man rotation, and it's going to happen, right? I can't
100%
expect
because injuries have been up anyway for the past couple of years. And if you add into the fact, but the one difference between this season and last season is that there's, again, I'm going back to the spring training. They're expecting to have a full spring training and a normal spring training, which means a lot more than people think.
Yeah, there could also be an issue if the season is delayed in terms of ramp up, ramp down. Who knows? We don't know what's going on. But I will say, though, what you said is correct, though. If there is 6-man rotations, especially late in the year, that makes streaming harder because one of the advantages, especially if you're in a shallower league, is to take, or in a weekly lineup setting, is to get these two-start pitchers that give you extra innings and extra strikeouts and extra potential for wins. So watch out. There might be less of those in baseball, and that would make your current roster a little bit more important. You know, Nick, you were saying early in the show that, you know, what do you do in season? They're streaming. Well, that's a factor because you're going to stream less if there is 6-man rotations. Anything to add to that?
Okay. So streaming sucks. And what the goal of streaming is to stop streaming. So if you attack streaming with the idea that I am picking up guys that could potentially stick on my team, then you're going to find yourself in June, July not streaming anymore. In 2019, if you look back, and I did this for First Pitch Florida last year.
I was there.
Oh, man. Do you remember the slide where I had a column that showcased all of the pitchers you could have gotten past picked 300, not even including the ones that were after 200 and dropped like leagues?
Yep.
And then there was a second column that had another list of names, and then it shoved on the whole screen Brandon Woodruff and Mike Soroka and Mike Minor that all were super helpful through the entire year. That is something you have to give yourself the opportunity to still do. So I'm completely with you that streaming is still going to be tough. At the beginning of 2020, it was really hard because players weren't going 5. They were going like 3 innings the first couple weeks. And then we missed out on streaming for like 2 to 3 weeks. Well, that's like what, a third of the season? I mean, that was really, really hurtful and it harmed your team a lot more. We'll still see some impact like that, exactly what you guys are talking about, where we might be seeing fewer innings in starts. And if it's not 2-start pitchers, I'm not too worried about the 2-start streaming market. But I am a little bit worried, especially a little bit in April, of guys that might get pulled a little bit sooner than we would like. Ruvain, you made a really good point about 6-man rotations. We always joke about this. Like, some team says, oh yeah, we're going to do a 6-man rotation. And then like 2 weeks in, doesn't exist anymore. It could happen more so this year. And I go back and forth on this. Like a team like the Tigers, they're saying they could ship away Matthew Boyd again, right? And you might think, oh, okay, they'll go 5-man then. But then there is an argument to be had that some of these teams will not shift it because they do want to get that volume on their younger starters now, so that when they are in their competitive window, they're not going to have to limit them at that point. At some point, they're going to have to push these guys. And it could be now. For some of these teams, it could not. I think it's going to be a very case-by-case basis. Like the Dodgers, I think I'm with you. They should be going 6-man. They could do something crazy where Bauer is not part of the 6-man. Like he goes every 5th day regardless, while everyone else like sidles around him, Things like that can work because you do want to limit Kershaw's innings. You still, I guess, for some reason, the Dodgers like, yeah, Bueller, not ready yet. David Price, how many are we going to get from him after missing all 2020? So that might work. I don't know. There are a lot of crazy ideas out there about it. We might see that from the Dodgers. But yeah, if I were a betting man, I do actually think that we'll see a significant amount of 6-man rotations. Not like half of the league, but we'll see. I would say like 5 of them actually sticking through the year.
Yeah, so that's the Dodgers, and because they have the talent to actually do the 6-man. They have the talent to do a 7-man rotation, to be honest. But how about a team like the Rays? Now, Blake Snell, we all know, only had 5-inning starts. Even in the World Series when he was rolling, 5-inning starts. I don't think they're going to do a 6-man rotation. The Rays would do a bullpen games, if any. But what do we do with starting pitchers on the Rays? Are they just because of the fact that to get a pitching win, it's about pitching length, right? Your team has to be up and you have to have length. You can pitch phenomenal and have a shutout in the 5th inning. But, if you're not in there for the 7th when they score, you ain't getting the win. So are you going to be fading pitchers on the Rays? Are you picking them with a little bit more caution because their win total could be lower?
I don't know if that's necessarily the reason why. For example, when Charlie Morton was there, I had no hesitation. He was in 2019. They were like, yeah, go ahead, Charlie, do your thing. And he had a fantastic season.
But who are they doing that this year with?
Well, they're not. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that's not necessarily that's the Rays. It's just that they don't have the guy that would fit that role, right? Like Glasnow, yeah, I am factoring the fact that they're not going to let him consistently go 6 innings. It's just not.
No, they're not
just
going
not
to.
what he's going to do. Ryan Yarbrough, I call him the fratty pirate because Yarbrough, he's probably not either. Even during his great 2019 stretch, Yarbrough was still pulled often in it, and it made me really upset about it. There's I know I'm forgetting a major name there, but there's Josh Fleming in there too. I'm not too thrilled about it. Like all of the arms that they have. We mentioned Chris Archer. I just those aren't the kind of pitchers that would force their way into the 6th constantly, and because of that, I have to take into account that they are on the Rays.
All right back to you on this one, Nick. We hope that the season starts on time, but it is entirely possible that the season is delayed by a month, let's say. We're not going to spend too much time on this question because I'm going to be optimistic here and say it won't, but how would that affect how you would be drafting players right now if you knew that there's going to be a month delay?
That's a great question. A couple things. One, the injured guys get a value boost. So like Mike Soroka, not supposed to start on opening day right now, but hey, then if it is delayed, then he returns. That's a good thing. You could say that like Chris Sale, Severino Syndergaard, those the moment that you would swing for
three
those
S's
guys should be. Yeah, there you go. They would jump up a little bit earlier. But it extends not just to the guys that are already injured. The ones that we generally have injury risks for are more enticing, because when they do miss time, it's less time relative. I guess what I'm getting at is if you say Jameson Taillon, we only expect 150 innings from him. Well, if no one is pitching more than 170, then that's fantastic, right? That's those injury-prone guys. They become a little bit more interesting to me. I also would say in the top 20 or 30, my rankings, I emphasize those that I expect to not only go like 175, but also 200 or so. Like Lance Lynn. Oh man, I love Lance Lynn for this year. There's no way Tony La Russa is even asking Lynn to get out of the game before 100 pitches, and B, with Lance Lynn's not going to let him take the ball from him. So you're going to see so many innings from him, and that's incredibly valuable. But if we have fewer games, then those that we expect to get the cutoff, like Brandon Woodruff, are at 175 because the Brewers are apparently only going to do a slap like across the board. Here you go, 100 innings, like they're throwing a magnet on the fridge. Then Brandon Woodruff isn't going past 180. However, you bring it all down, Woodruff, Lynn, much more appetizing to take Woodruff instead of Lynn, right? That's kind of the major difference if it does shift. I really hope it doesn't, Ariel. I'm not going to throw that juju out there.
Yep.
Okay, not going to happen.
Yeah, no, of course that is the right point, and of course, as we talk on the show, that auction prices are not a real thing, and they're all relative to each other. And of course, if you would have pitched a smaller number of innings relative to somebody else, if you're gonna be at the same threshold, but everyone else is down because there's fewer innings, there's a month less, then you're relatively going up. Ruvain, did we miss anybody? Maybe somebody who's injured, could be hitters or anybody. It's not just a pitcher question here, really.
Well, for I'm going to continue with the pitchers, not just the pitchers who are coming off injury like the ones you mentioned already, but also David Price, Marcus Stroman, the pitchers who didn't pitch at all last year. They may take a little bit longer to get going, and the managers may have a very quicker hook earlier on. But if they're able to build up their stamina earlier on in let's say inter-squad games, something like that, then you may be able to get more innings out of them. Another guy, Miles Mikolas, he's coming off of an injury, more time for him to rehab. Everyone has to remember last year in March, everyone's on the Phillies said that Andrew McCutchen wasn't going to start on time. He was going to be a month late. The season was delayed. He didn't miss any time. So people who drafted him early, they had no problem getting him, and they got him, and they got all they needed out of him. So a lot of these players who are going to be available in May, in June, back to their quote unquote full load, then you're going to get the most out of them.
Yeah, you know what the interesting thing is, and this is the actuary in me talking, but when you generally draft injured players or injury risk players, when you're making the assumption on a team that injury risk is not correlated, right? What does somebody who's pitching on the Brewers have to do with an injury on the Dodgers who's hitting? Like you wouldn't think that injury is correlated, but if you think about it, it is correlated here because the time, right? If we're missing a month and it's delayed, injury players get more injured time back. So when you're drafting a very risky team because of injury, it's actually an increased risk. You're not diversifying because you have different players. Risk could be all together, right? The same macro influence on injury, which is time for recovery, appears both for anybody in the whole sport. Doesn't matter what your injury is from. So it's just a very interesting actuarial thing I've noticed about this. But back to the pitching here. So you mentioned that what the Brewers are doing, and they're going to add, or at least they say they just whatever you had last year, add 100. Is this a Brewers thing only? Are other teams going to do that? And just in general, Nick, how can people who have only had 50, 60 innings last year, how can they actually physically ramp up to 180, 190? You talked about, you want your youngsters, getting more volume because when the team is ready, you want them to be able to go a lot. How are people really gonna ramp up that much, other than the old Lance Lynn veterans and Bauer who wants to pitch 400 innings this year? How's that gonna work?
Yeah, so you might remember I mentioned before that the hardest thing to do this year is to project volume because we just don't know. I would say, for me personally, I'm making an assumption that any pitcher who has already showcased volume in their past, for example, Lucas Giolito throwing 175 innings or so for 2 years already, is going to be able to do that again. Look, we just don't know how much they actually pitched. Yes, we have this number of major league innings. How much did they pitch in the alternate sites? How much did they pitch in the winter leagues now? Because teams like, hey, we still need to get more volume from you. Hey, how many of them were still going hard in May and June in preparation for the 2020 season? We really just don't know. And if I'm going to do anything harsh, it's more so for the young guys that really have not done much of anything in the majors thus far. Those are really the only ones I'm treating harshly. But someone even like Zach Gallen, who is young, but he threw 170 innings in minor league ball and the majors in 2019. I don't really see a problem having him go more than 160 for 2021. And that could be completely wrong. But this is all we have to base on this. And
Right.
I'm hoping I'm not wrong.
Right. All right. So there's definite correlation, you think, between past innings ramp up and what's going to be, and obviously we'll find that out soon enough.
Well, so basically, let me add something and add another idea here. When pitchers come back from injury, like I'm going to give an example, a pitcher we're going to talk about later, Andrew Heaney. In 2017, he only threw 21 innings, but in 2018, he threw 180 innings. So it is doable to jump from that low number to high, but I think it's going to vary from organization to organization.
Yeah, and the question I want to ask, I'll throw in an additional thing there. Take a guy like David Price, who didn't pitch at all last year. Maybe Price is not the best example because he's an older guy, but in general, one of the opt-outs. Like, can a guy who opted out just come back straight from there?
I mean, you have Kopech who opted out, but it's not like Kopech wasn't pitching until he opted out. And when he opted out, it's not like he's just playing video games all day. These guys recognize that, oh, right, I need to be in the best shape of my life or ready to go for 2021. So I'm not treating it too harshly.
Okay.
I have to think these guys recognize it, that they need to be prepared. And there's going to be a lot expected from them. They're going to do what they need to do to be prepared for it.
Right. All right, just last general, any other comments about what might be different for 2021, not in terms of the pitching landscape, but in terms of our thought process compared to a regular year?
Yep, I'm going to be a lot more wrong than before. That's all I got there. Just so be prepared for that, and I can't wait to experiencing it with all of you.
Yeah. I mean, as far as projections will go, of course, the accuracy of projections this year will be worse than in most years.
What are we supposed to do, Ariel?
That's
so
what
crazy.
it is. But you have the same problem as everybody else. So
right. So let's just have fun and embrace it. And
then after the draft, when people are starting to get pick people up on Fab, people used all their money very early last year. Everyone has to get back to spreading their money out, otherwise they're going to have nothing left.
Yeah, but listen, it's an opportunity. Anytime there's something different, it's an opportunity for the people who are smart and who have a good sense of what to do to gain. Right, the less you have steady. Now you think, and those who can think well will do more, and that's why we have this show, to give everyone here nuggets of information that you really can't get anywhere else in terms of your thought process, more than just the players, your thought process. We're going to talk now about the starting pitcher playing pool. We talked with Paul Sporer the other week about some of the top of the pitching draft, so we're going to focus a little bit more on the bottom. But just before we get to that, Nick, do you have a general starting pitcher strategy in terms of drafting? Just for example, I know there's people who do the pocket aces strategy where I need two pitchers in the first 3 rounds. I can't live without it. Then some pitchers, don't need to do that, or some people are going full stars and scrubs, just pick pitchers in the middle. Like, do you have a specific strategy that you're doing this year or not, or you're just going for the value?
Sure, I love Toby. That is batflip crazy with the pocket aces. I recognize that I like to think that my strength is recognizing pitching. So I draft that way. That is, I don't go after pitching early because I'd rather spend on hitters so that I can adapt with pitching, work on my strength, right? But for this season, I've done a lot of mock drafts and talked to my staff about the ones that we did. We ran 4 of them through the offseason. And keep in mind, this is for 12 teamers. That's generally how I approach talking about fantasy baseball. My main strategy is 4 starting pitchers within the first 10 rounds that I trust, that I feel like I'm not going to drop any of them through the entire year. Those that are going to get me over 150 innings each, hopefully around 170 each. And having that foundation essentially says, okay, with the other half of my rotation, because generally you have about 8 starters or so. I sometimes get carried away and have like 10, but you have about 8 or so. You got to find the other 4 either in the back half of that draft or during the regular season, and have the recognition that, normally when I draft a 12-teamer, that is 23 rounds or so, look back at your previous drafts and figure out how many of them you actually kept for the season. I think you'll find that you kept maybe half of them through the full season. Recognize that these are guys that you could likely be dropping early on. So then you should be doing two things. One, getting starting pitchers that have favorable schedules early, because you'll recognize like, oh, I'm on the fence about this guy. Oh, wait, he has two tough starts that I don't want to start him against early. Why would you be drafting that guy when you can get production of someone like Zach Davies or Alec Mills, who both get the Pittsburgh Pirates twice to start the season? That sounds like something I would much rather do. And then I can throw back Alec Mills. There'll be someone else that I want to get after that. So if you have that approach of saying I have four that are anchoring my staff, it doesn't need to be DeGrom and Cole and Bieber. It can be like Kenta Maeda and Lance Landon, Carlos Carrasco and Zach Greinke. Great. Maybe some Sandy Alcantara in there. Just across the first 10 rounds, you got to get four of those guys. Set yourself up for that opportunity. As far as auctions go, I feel kind of similarly. Maybe I would spend a little bit more on another starter that I like. I might act because I recognize that the strategy I have for snake drafts doesn't really reflect normally, because the dollar value can be kind of equal farther into the pitching pool than I would like. So I might favor one guy in the top 10 that I would pay a little bit more for, and then go for three more before inside the top 40 or so. But the same premise is there on both ends. Four guys that you really trust, and then open yourself for the opportunity to add during the season.
All right, interesting. We haven't really heard that kind of thing on our show so far this year. Ruvain, I'll ask you this. We've noticed from talking with each other that there are some players that maybe we'll prefer more in a snake draft setting, or at least we will find ourselves rostering more, and maybe there's some players that we'll find rostering more in an auction. Who are some of those players for you?
Well, some of those players, those are like the 1A players. You mentioned a couple of them already. You mentioned Carlos Carrasco. If you want strikeouts, you can go with either a Lucas Giolito, who's not as high up. You can go with a lot of these
This is for draft?
mid-range guys. In a draft, it depends where you are, depends how the draft is going, depends on the runs. But in auction, you can actually pick and choose. You can pick who you want. That's the beauty of an auction. You can spend however much you want on each pitcher, but you have to use the money smartly. Otherwise, you're going to lose them. You're going to lose value. The main thing is value. In my opinion, value. It doesn't matter who you're going to get. If they fit your value and they fit your team, then they're worthwhile.
Yeah, I'm going to find myself drafting not much of Max Scherzer in a snake draft, but I might actually go for him in an auction. I think that people are, with Scherzer, it's funny, you look at all the projections and they look like he's still awesome, top 8, top 9 pitcher, but people don't want to pick him. He's going to fall off, he won't pitch, and they're sort of fading him just by the whim of their seat, but somebody will pick him up at a certain point in a draft. For an auction, I feel like they're going to fade him even more. Why spend $30 on Max Scherzer? Get somebody else, and you'll find that there's so many other pitchers that will be pushed up more that Max Scherzer will be maybe the 10th or 11th best pitcher in, not best, but most money spent on in an auction, and that might be a buying opportunity that maybe I'll go for. Any pitchers that for you, Nick, that you might be less or more, whether you're in a draft or auction?
That's a really good point with Scherzer, by the way. I don't think he gets enough respect. He deserves more respect. I could see on the other side of it, like I find myself in snake drafts getting Kenta Maeda and Zach Gallen a bit later, 4th, 5th rounds, as opposed to the 3rd round swing where all those guys go in the top 10. And kind of Lance Landon and Carrasco and stuff, I can see myself getting them as they fall, but then auctions, they get kind of grouped together with the other ones. Blake Snell is a good example. Blake Snell is costing more than his snake draft relative price, right? Like a 2-round difference in a snake draft is way different than a couple dollars relative in the auction.
Right.
So that's kind of where I would see the biggest gap. And also, I think in snake drafts, I find myself in the last couple rounds just getting my fun guys more often. And I feel like Drew Smiley, for example, I would not be able to get him for $1. I'll have to spend like $5-6 to get Drew Smiley. But then in a snake draft, I can just get him in the 20th round, and I feel like that's a lot easier to get. So
those are great points. And I'll just to touch on a little bit of what you said there to expand. in a draft, you're right. If the supposed value or the deemed draft capital that you'd have to pay at each point in the draft goes down a little bit more significantly than the drop that the players are worth in terms of auction dollars. So if you take a look at, let's say, ATC auction dollars that are generated, there's going to be a large pack of pitchers somewhere that vary between $2 and $3, right? And you can find more of a market efficiency there, where just because there's so many pitchers valued the same, somebody is going to drop more. So I would expect for those clumps where there's a lot of people in there, you're going to get pitchers more in that range, whereas in a draft, you probably won't get them because they're either going to be overvalued from your standpoint, or they're just not going to be available because people have to take the certain quantity. So that's a good point, and I think you should be aware of that the clumps of value are a big distinguisher between auctions and drafts in terms of who you're going to get and what your plan is. You cannot create the same plan for a draft than an auction. People make this mistake all the time, that when you're planning, you can't just say, I like this pitcher, I like this pitcher. Some pitchers are a bigger value in auction and some are a bigger value in drafts, and you have to plan each one individually against the market for that format, right? It's totally different. You can't just make one plan. Plan everything. Every league has to be individually, but draft and auction has more differences than you think. Yeah. All right. Now, for the part of the show, we talk about the ATC player discussion. That's where we take a couple of players who, on the surface, ATC seems like is a bargain as compared to the market, and we talk about whether we think that, right? Well, you don't love projections, but let's see what ATC says something, and I might disagree also, right? We don't take it as gospel, but ATC helps us bubble up some potential guys. So we're interested in what you're going to say about it, and we'll go around the room. Our first pitcher to talk about is Sean Manaea. Sean Manaea, who, his best part of his game is his walk rate. His walk rate is super low at about 4%. Strikeout rate, not as good. He's got about a 20% strikeout rate, which is meh. But what I think you're getting out of Sean Manaea are some good ratios, or at least a nice, a very high floor of what you're going to get. You're not going to get disasters. He has a 50% ground ball rate approximately. That's going to tell you that he's not going to be prone to these blow up games. Looking at ATC's interprojection metrics, Sean Manaea has a 2.5 standard deviation. That's really low. So projections are really tight on him, and projections are saying he's about a $9 player in a 15-team auction, where he's going for about $5. Now, I usually don't mention this on the show, but when I give auction dollar amounts, I can give amounts for any different kind of format, but just to standardize, I'm going to be talking more NFBC style, 15-team, 5x5. If you play in the 10-team, it's going to vary different, but just so that I have a standard thing, I throw out numbers like that. Anyways, Nick, what are your thoughts about Sean Manaea? Are you interested, and where am I wrong?
I don't really care for Sean Manaea this year. I mean, and a 12-teamer, right? I understand 15-teamer. I think there's a little bit more value. I think he's very borderline of what I call a Toby, which, if you don't know a Toby, he's someone who you work with who gets the job done, but you don't really like him. And that's obviously Toby from The Office. And Sean Manaea is going to be teetering with your waiver wire, I think, a lot in a 12-teamer because, I mean, he doesn't strike out guys. 20% rate last year, near 17% 2018. He had that really weird blip when he came back for September in 2019, but that was not stable. We all knew that. It's about 20 innings or so. And Manaea, like, when you look at him as a pitcher, like, how does he do things? He's a sidewinder who has always had injury problems. He doesn't throw particularly hard, and he isn't a command-focused guy. He just kind of, I call him a shover. Like he like shoves the ball into the zone. It's not this, normally guys are just there. They're whipping it in there. He just kind of gets it there. And it doesn't have this feel of command intact that would suggest that he should have this really suppressed hard contact rates, or that he should be missing a ton of bats. He doesn't really have those major secondary pitches. The slider / curveball breakers aren't really special. Changeup has its moments. So with Sean Manaea, it's just kind of borderline as a 12-teamer. And the problem is let's say he's the fourth starter. I don't know if that's what it's going to be. It doesn't really matter. The first 3 series that the Athletics have are a 4-game set against Houston, 3 against the Dodgers, and then 3 against Houston again. So Manaea could easily get the Houston Astros twice to start the year. If I am in a 12-teamer, I'm not starting Manaea for either of those 2 games. And so if I'm drafting him in a 12-teamer, I'm going to sit on my hands with Sean Manaea for 2 weeks for a guy whose ceiling is nothing great, and I can likely find someone to replace him on the waiver wire if I wanted to chase a 3.7 ERA at a 120 whip with a sub 20% strikeout rate. Like, I don't see the appeal of me drafting Sean Manaea. So yeah, I'm not too interested.
That's a good point, and I think for him the league size matters, right?
Oh,
I think,
yes.
I think very much. Certainly in a 12 team league, we're talking somebody who might ride the waiver wire, and especially you made a good point about the matchups are pretty bad early on. But for me, look at his track record. Look at his roto values over the past couple of years: $5, $2, $9, $5. Last year, 0. We're talking about somebody who has earned value, and that's because his ratios are solid: 3.86, 3.6, 1.21 ERA. Last year he had a 4.5, but he was a little bit unlucky. His FIP was 3.7. So I kind of like 15-team league, a guy that you're getting who's going in the 17th round to pad some of your ERA. To me, that's a unique profile in the 17th round. I'm interested because I think he's going to probably drop. He's probably worth a few rounds more just looking at his expected production.
I mean, you don't know if he's going to pad your ERA. And not to mention, he has an injury history that isn't favorable. Yeah,
but he's
this
cheap
is the
enough
year.
but he's still cheap enough to drop. He's in the 17th round. So I think he's worth more in a 15-team league, and if you drop him, you drop him,
Right. Yeah, in a 15-team league, I understand the point of saying, hey, that potential ERA plays up better. I think from 2018 when Manaea had a 3.59 ERA, his expected ERA was 4.69. We didn't quite believe it. It only came with a 16.5% strikeout rate as well.
Yeah,
it
it's pretty
seemed
bad there,
all
right?
kind of just, and a small sample of last year didn't really showcase anything different.
Yeah.
And 2019 we all knew was an anomaly. So it's just a lot of shrugs. And I will say this: if I'm drafting a guy, even if it's the 17th round, I have a philosophy of not drafting guys for the most part. I mean, this is not. There are no catch-alls here. But in general, I like drafting guys thinking that they can be more than what I'm drafting them at, right? And so you're saying 17th round, 15th team Rashawn Manaea. I don't know if he can be much more than that. So I think there are other options out there that will make you will make up your mind earlier in the season, and that will allow you to find something else that could be better if it doesn't work out. But if it does work out, then it's a better value at the 17th round than what Manaea would provide.
All right, got it. He is the opposite of a Chris Archer type guy, which is the kind of guy that I stay away from. So interesting thought there. How about you, Ruvain? Anything to add to the conversation?
Yes, actually, he's going to be a little bit farther away from that shoulder surgery. So it's going to be very interesting to see if his velocity goes up a little bit in the spring, and that may be
Yeah, it
something
was
to
down.
watch for.
It's been
because
down the last couple years.
It's been down, and now he has a normal, quote-unquote, normal offseason. His BABIP last year was 30 points higher than his career, which means he was a little bit unlucky, and now maybe his defense gets a little bit better. I mean, they now have Andrews at short instead of Marcus Simeon. It's a slight increase because he is a ground ball pitcher, so he may get a little bit more lucky. He may have better defense, especially because he's a ground ball pitcher. So, I mean, with that better defense, you may have some upside. And plus, one thing in his favor, his hard hit rate was down last year, which is something good. And if he can get his velocity up, that may be someone you may be willing to pick in the 17th or 18th round.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, he's not a guy that screams, oh my God, but, for the price, I think it's very interesting. And, of course, as I say with everybody, it depends on the composition of your team. If you have a nice lead in strikeouts per pitcher slot, he's a guy that would fit in. If you have the ratios and you're a bit down on the strikeouts, he would not fit your roster. So it's also context heavy there. All right, it's now...
actually,
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Sure.
I'm very curious. I wish I had it in front of me. Where is Mike Minor going relative to Sean Manaea?
I will pull that up quickly on my
You're the best,
dashboard there.
Ariel.
I don't. Mike Minor's going the 21st round, so he's going
Okay.
a couple rounds later.
So that's a very interesting comparison because I think Minor's going to get more innings than Mania is. I
Yes.
think Mania,
Yes.
the Minor has a favorable matchup at least to start the year where we can see where he's at. He made improvements to his breaking stuff last year. I mean, essentially, I see them kind of in the same mold of this. I don't really expect them to have 25% strikeout rates. I don't, but I also think they can help in ERA and WHIP to some degree. And in my head, I'm like, well, I think Minor's showcased that he can have a 200 strikeout season as recent as 2 years ago, in 2019 when he told the guy to drop the ball in foul territory. There's something to be said about that. That was just the first name that came to mind, but I have to think there are other guys around that area that provide something similar, if not more.
Yeah, there are, and we're going to talk about some of them today as well. Good point about Mike Minor. Just he's got a negative 0.5 interprojectional skew, which means Mike Minor has more upside to his projection than just the average. Although his average is not fantastic, I'm projecting him for a 4.6 ERA. I don't love that, so that's why I'm going to probably stay away from Minor because of that. But he does have more upside than Minaya does. That I'll give you over there. All right, it's time for the Injury Guru's Weekly Trivia.
Well, the next player we're going to be discussing is going to be Andrew Heaney. I mentioned him earlier in the show. He does have a history of injuries. So my trivia question for this week is this. Who has pitched more innings since 2014? Is it Andrew Heaney or Rich Hill? Nick, what do you think?
Oh, that's going to be since 2018.
Since 2014.
Oh, that's going to be Rich Hill.
Okay, Ariel, what do you think?
I would have said Heaney, except that you're asking the question with Hill. The question is, why are you asking the question? I'm gonna say Hill because I think it's gonna be a trick question here.
Okay, the answer is Rich Hill. Rich Hill has pitched
All right.
507 innings, and Andrew Heaney has pitched 502.
No,
So
same.
just think about that. Just Andrew Heaney has gone through all these injury things. So has Rich Hill. Rich Hill has gotten you a lot more value. Now, as a bonus question, which teams did they pitch for during that time period? This is a little bit tougher.
Heaney is just the Angels, right?
Not just the Angels, no.
No. He was on the Marlins.
Marlins.
That's correct.
That's where he came
That's
from.
correct.
Yeah.
He came up
yeah.
with the Marlins.
I remember
Now-
watching his debut. I think it was even against the Angels. Maybe not.
Now, Rich Hill, what teams has he pitched for since 2014?
Oakland.
Cubs, Red Sox.
Oakland Red Sox, that's 2.
It's not Cubs.
Nope.
Oh, that was his 2009.
Dodgers and Twins. Dodgers and Twins.
Dodgers and Twins, correct. They got 2 more.
He pitched the 2 more.
Yes. One of them was the Yankees. He did pitch very
Yankees?
briefly with the Yankees. And
was
he
in my
used to be a teammate of Andrew Heaney. He did pitch for the Angels as well during
Wow.
that time period. Now, the reason why I bring it up is because we're going to be talking about Andrew Heaney. Now, Heaney had a shoulder injury in 2019, elbow in early 2019, shoulder issue in 2018, elbow in 2017. He pitched 180 innings, like I mentioned, only once in 2018. In 21 innings in 2000, he had only 21 innings in 2017. His K rate has gone down. His ground ball rate has gone up. This is going to be his first true healthy offseason in I guess since 2014. So he's a pitcher that people are not really that high on because they're always nervous about the injury aspect, but he's a possibility that he can turn into that quote-unquote Rich Hill guy that people are scared off by the injury, but you can get a lot of value out of him.
So, Ruvain, who has more innings in 2021, Heaney or Minaya?
Heaney or Minaya? I'm going to say probably Minaya, just because of track. Also, same thing, track record. I think Minaya will just have more innings. Heaney, I still think he can probably get you 120 to 140 innings, maybe tops. But I can see Minaya, if he's healthy and if his velocity is up, he can give you 150 if the Athletics are willing to push him.
ATC thinks that Heaney can go to 165 more than Minaya. What about you, Nick?
Yeah, I think it's Heaney. Heaney had 180 in 2018 and then pitched the full 2020 with 67 innings. Yeah, sure, it was 95 in 2019. Minaya, to me, he's just trying to grind it out a little bit more. And I feel like I understand Heaney's track record. I mean, he had 6 starts in 2016 and 17 combined. So I recognize this, but I still give the nod to Heaney.
All right. So Heaney, his strikeouts have bounced a little bit around, but it's always been mid to high 20%. His swinging strike is fantastic. He sports somewhere between a 12 and 14% swinging strike rate annually. That's fantastic. He does give up homers. But in terms of value, look at his fantasy value since 2015 in a 15-team 5x5 format. 3, -2, -6, 2, -2, -1, -1. I read you Sean Manaea's before, so are you higher on Heaney than Manaea?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not getting either one probably because I don't truly trust Heaney because Heaney is so inconsistent and it's maddening because he can be so good.
Potential.
Yeah, it's maddening. I call it a poor execution, awesome stuff. Where he has this really good changeup that misses a ton of bats. He has a curveball that he keeps down, and his sinker at times, like he can do the full triangle of pitch separation of sinkers up and changeups arm side away from right-handers and curveballs down and in glove side, to right-handers. So it's all there, and seeing the fact that he's pretty much had a 26% strikeout rate over his past 3 years is crazy good. But right, it is the home runs. That's why he has a 4+ ERA along that way, about 4 or 5, despite never being above a 1.3 WHIP. So he is actually helping you in 2 departments there, strikeouts and WHIP. It's just, of course, those home runs. Maybe the dead ball does help him. I'm not going to do that, by the way. I'm not going to. We can't put any weights on that dead ball. But, whatever. It could. But with Heaney, I don't trust, that he's, okay, they're both sidewinders, and I don't like sidewinders. I don't like guys who throw cross body. They're both lefties doing this. It's kind of funny to me. And neither of them, I think, are able to have the fastball command they need to have to take the next step. The benefit for Heaney is that his changeup and curveball are both going to miss more bats than either of the offerings that Manaea has. He also throws, I think, a little bit harder with that sinker, and when he elevates, he has more success. But Manaea, for whatever reason, is able to get a little bit worse contact and avoid the long ball. I think Heaney has a lot more of a ceiling to go after. I understand not wanting to take the chance on him. I'm probably not drafting either of these guys. But if I had to go with one, I would go with Heaney because you'll probably get more of an overall benefit, I think.
All right. Heaney, of course, is going 3 rounds before Manaea. So I think that I don't think that he's 3 rounds better, even in the 14th round. I think Manaea's the better value between the two of them. I will say, though, that I think that I would have more shares of Heaney in auction rather than draft because I don't think I'm picking a pitcher, especially him in that range, when I think there's some better bargains a little bit later. But in an auction, if I get enough of a bargain off of his price, I'm good with. So I think Heaney is more of an auction. I'm not going to say target, but more of an auction possibility for me. Ruvain, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm so nervous about Heaney. Heaney's been on our team, me and you, Ariel. We've been on our team almost every single year.
Not a lot of shares, though. Not one share here or there.
But we always target him, and we always think, you know what? He's going to be a bargain. We're going to want to. He's one of the biggest bargains almost every year. But he's never lived up to that hype, and that's the problem. He's never lived up to it. You know what? A lot of pitchers take time to get to their hype. Maybe if he has a full offseason, maybe he'll be the Dylan Bundy this year and he'll live up to the hype. You never know.
Ooh, Dylan Bundy needed to do a massive pitch approach change. And we were yelling at it from afar for Baltimore, and it finally happened in LA, thankfully.
Yeah, well, I know Fast loves him, but, everyone knows he's going to throw a curveball on pitch 1 now. Because the book is out on him, so...
Because Fast wrote that article. But actually, staying with the Orioles, I'm shocked to see John Means going 2 picks later than Andrew Heaney, and I would jump all over that at 215 overall.
Yeah.
Just out there.
Right. Okay, let's move on to Jose Urquidy. Jose Urquidy, I was very high on him last year. And he actually was pretty good in the limited... he pitched 30 innings last year, limited, but he was worth an annual $4, which is a lot better than what you had to pay for him to get him. I still like him this year, but caution, he was not as good last year as some of his surface numbers indicated. Very, very lucky. BABIP 209, Strand rate 87%. BABIP, of course, is normally 300. That means that there's far fewer things that actually went through from hits. That's luck. And 87% strand rate, so almost 9 out of 10 runners who got on didn't score. The major league average is closer to 70-75. He only had 17 strikeouts and 30 innings pitched. Ouch. I don't know if that's an injury thing or not, but that's not a good sign. And he had a very low ground ball rate. So I fear disaster could happen. And look at his interprojectional volatility. $7 is humongous. So projections don't even agree. There's parameter risk present. And his interprojectional skew is +1. That means that most projections are actually down on him, lower than the ATC average says. So looking at some of the risk factors and all that, even though he's about a $4 bargain in an auction setting, he's going in the 16th round, I think that there's more downside possible here. I might be shying away. What about you, Nick?
Oh man, there's not enough of a sample to pull everything you need to know about Jose Urquidy, in my view.
Okay.
I think Urquidy's way better than where he's getting drafted. It's kind of shocking because I'm not
Okay,
really,
interesting.
I wouldn't call myself a fan of Jose Urquidy. I get a sense that the general consensus in like 12 teamers or so are going to be, you're going to have someone in your league that's going to draft Jose Urquidy before I would, is what I'm trying to get at. I'm seeing really quickly, like the bat has him at 454. You guys have him at 415. Depth charts at 475. Seamer at 466 ERAs. I mean, yeah, Jose Urquidy is someone that could easily have a sub-4 ERA. It was weird to see both of his slider and curveball all of a sudden drop significantly in swing strike rate from near 20% rates in 2019. That seemed actually sustainable for how he was performing. And, watching those games, and they just kind of didn't work as well in 2020. We'd have such a small sample, and part of that sample is the weirdness of 2020, and we only have 41 innings before that. I think it's shifting everything in this weird direction for Jose Urquidy. I know it's weird to talk about this because I call it the playoff tax, but I think we've all forgotten about his weird World Series performance in 2019. Like, that is what Jose Urquidy can do. And I don't think that his talent level is so far away. Like, I don't think that was just one moment in the sun. He's just a bad pitcher otherwise. He's someone with a really good changeup. And his breaking stuff, as I mentioned before, has shown abilities to miss bats, and his fastball's good enough. Like, it's all there. I think the only real concern that I have with Jose Urquidy is not the ratios. It's how much is he actually going to go? He's only combined for 70 innings in the majors from 2019 and 20. Sure, there were some playoff innings in there too. So say, yeah, like 100 at most. It doesn't make for 170 innings this year, even if Dusty Baker is your manager. So, okay, 150. If I'm getting 150 of Jose Urquidy, I think those should be beneficial to you, even in a 12-team, let alone a 15. And 150 innings, well, is that going to be any different from Heaney and Minaya? I don't really think it's going to be so far off. So I would much rather have Urquidy compared to those other two guys. I don't know where he's ranked right now in the things, but yeah, I figured I'd say that.
Well, all these pitchers that I've said so far have roughly the same value, and they're all bargains according to ATC. I like him better than Heaney for sure for this year. There are a lot of factors that give me pause on Urquidy. But before last year happened, I was really high on him. So I'm sort of in the middle. I might again. It all depends on where he goes, and he's another guy that I think I might take a stab at him in an auction, but maybe not in a draft. What else are we missing, Ruvain, from the Urquidy puzzle?
I'm throwing 2020, just like Nick said. I'm throwing 2020 out the window, completely out the window.
Yes,
yes, because he started late. He
Love
started late because of COVID. Number one. Number two, those 30 innings, that was his spring training. There's no minor leagues. He couldn't ramp up. So all that stuff. He can be a great bargain. Plus, remember, going into the beginning of last year, if the season would have started on time, his role was in question. They didn't even know what they wanted him to do. So in the spring training, they were thinking about making him a starter, putting long relief. They had no idea what they were doing. By the time he he got up. I mean, Verlander was down already, and they needed another starter. So I think those 30 innings, those were just his spring training innings, and he was just getting warmed up. The question again, just like Nick, how many innings they're going to get at him. I still think he can. They may cap him at 140, 150, and if the season starts late, this is a guy to target because you know what? You're going to get those full 140, 150, and I think he's a great guy to have.
All right, so I guess I should be trusting. I should be trusting ATC here more, is what you're saying, Nick.
What I'm saying is you should trust Irvain more is what you should be doing.
There
Well,
you go.
I'm just giving my opinion based on the fact that he's one of those guys. He didn't miss time because of injury. He missed it because of COVID protocols.
Right,
It didn't even come
right,
out to say
right.
whether
Yeah.
he even had it, but had to be in isolation. He had problems with a visa. It was like a whole big mess.
Yeah,
I
and
got a
this
question.
whole thing. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question for Ruven, actually. Do you think that having COVID affected pitchers differently and maybe more than hitters? Because we saw, Eduardo Rodriguez, he didn't pitch at all, but we saw Freddie Freeman win the MVP. Of course, I'm only giving you 2 points of data, but maybe you have a better understanding as to, is there a difference between pitchers and hitters for COVID?
It's a difference between person to person, let alone pitchers to hitters. People get this virus differently. It reacts to them differently. People are getting the vaccines now. People are reacting differently to the vaccines. This is such an unknown that when it comes to pitchers or hitters reacting differently, it's a matter of the person. It's a matter of their background, of their nationality. It's a whole. You're opening a whole different bowl of wax when you're saying comparing pitchers to hitters. It has to do with their actual bodies as opposed to whether they're pitchers or hitters.
Okay, Nick, other thought?
Yeah, the time frame is different too, and the fact that the pitchers need, they need to actually be pitching to be able to pitch, as opposed to a hitter.
Right.
Not to say that they don't have to have any rehab or anything like that, but yeah, a lot of times you can just kind of be like, all right, go back in there after a couple of days, and they're back to normal, And a pitcher, no, you see, great example again, John Means, who got interrupted, had COVID, started late, a tragedy happened, his father passed away. And then had to ramp up again. We literally didn't see Means actually stretched out to be a pitcher until the last couple starts of the year. That was it. And, missing time is like COVID is a good reason why a lot of these guys miss time. I think it does affect the timelines of pitchers more so than it does hitters.
All right, so I think that both of what you guys have said is correct. So it does affect the pitchers, but the reason is not because of the COVID; it's because of the timeline more than anything else. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Okay, next pitcher is Eduardo Rodriguez, who ATC sees as another pretty good bargain here. He's somebody that look at his rotisserie values last couple of years. $4, $6, $11, and of course didn't pitch last year. He had 200-plus innings in 2019 with 213 strikeouts. He's somebody that I really want to see what's going on in spring training, just to give me the feeling that, okay, this looks like Eduardo Rodriguez, right? But look at his career. I mean, the last two years that he pitched, ERA 3.8, 3.82, 3.81. He's a guy who has a 25% strikeout rate for his career. He had a 50% ground ball rate in 2019. And I think what's going on is in the market, you are getting a nice bargain because of the uncertainty of pitching, right? I mean, if he pitched even 3 innings last year, he probably would be going for a higher price. But the fact that you're getting uncertainty might allow you to get in for a discount over here. Now, to check the interprojectional metrics, standard deviation 2.8 means projections are very tight. Projections are pretty much in agreement that he's good, and he's got a negative half skew, which means that even with the projections, there's some outlandish thing low. Most of the projections actually point up to him. So this is somebody that the numbers seem to me is someone you can get, that you're getting the discount because he didn't pitch. I don't see much downside here. He's now had time to rest, and the question is he fully healthy? And if he is, I think he's a fine guy to get. I'll go to Ruvain first on him because it's an injury issue.
Yeah, I think the best comparison to him would be Cookie Carrasco. He had the issue with cancer, and it wasn't a pitching injury, just like Eduardo Rodriguez. It's not a physical pitching injury. So it's a matter of how they're able to build up the stamina and come back and like that. So I have no doubt that they would not let him pitch unless he was 100% ready and he felt 100% ready to go through the daily grind of going through everything. So, with that in mind, and with the Boston Red Sox manager already saying that he's going to be ready for opening day, you know what? I think he's a number one starter. Yes, Nate Eovaldi is questionably their number one starter, but I think he will be. This is going to be a bold prediction for this. I think he will be the Red Sox representative All-Star weekend.
Ooh, I like it. So I guess you like him there. Nick,
Yes.
do you agree with this assessment?
I mean, I hope he's not the number one in Boston because that means he has to get the Rays the second time instead of another start against Baltimore. That would be better. Uh, but no. I mean, Eduardo Rodriguez to me is kind of startling in so many ways. The fact that his hit per nine has throughout his entire career been a low of 826 and a high of 888. I mean, to be that consistent with hit per nine is just so unheard of. And that's just kind of who Eduardo is. And it's frustrating. So if you remember in 2019, if you rostered Eduardo Rodriguez, there you were in the middle of August, August 10th, where Eduardo had a 4.31 ERA and a 1.37 whip. And you weren't holding him anymore. You weren't rostering him after those 4 months. It was too much to handle, but then 6 of his next 7 starts were amazing. And at the end of the year, it was a 3.81 ERA with a whip down 4 points to 133. And we look at it, they go, oh man, yeah, Eduardo, wow, yeah, that was his best ERA all of a sudden. That kind of back and forth is typical with Eduardo Rodriguez. It's why he's always hovering a 130 whip. It's why he's kind of dancing with his 4 ERA. It's his changeup. Like, his changeup can miss so many bats, and when he's able to get those swings on it in a given day, he's going to have a good one. It depends on his four-seamer or sinker, depends on which one he's feeling that day. But whichever one, if one is actually working, then he can set up that changeup. He doesn't have a solid third pitch, though. The slider/cutter, it does an okay job of stealing strikes. It doesn't miss bats, and it doesn't suppress contact well enough. So it's too volatile, and if it's volatility, I mean, I know this is a very black and white way of saying it and blunt, but if a guy's like volatile like this, you don't know which one's going to be the more beneficial half, the first or the second. And if it's the second, well, are you going to keep the faith after the first? I mean, he's such a... I don't really see a season where Eduardo puts it all together. And even throw in all of the concerns about his health. I mean, oh my God, terrifying. I hope he's okay. And, those questions of, all right, how much is he going to pitch now? I mean, all of that's just extra haze into this it just makes it more concerning to roster. So I get it, 5% strikeout rate for Eduardo consistently there. And you kind of know what you're getting. But man, he's one of those guys that can be a real headache in season.
I'm going to say 3 things. First of all, you're wrong about people dropping him and in 2019 because Ruben and I play in a 10-team league, and on the last game of the season, he pitched a pretty good outing, and we lost the league because he had 9 or 10 strikeouts.
Well,
so
but
we're aware of him.
But that
Yes,
was
we are.
after his 6 to 7 start good streak. So if he was dropped, he was picked up again.
That could be, but I'm going to go with the damn that guy got me attitude.
Yeah, let us have that. Come on.
I'm so sorry.
The second thing I'm going to say is that ATC is projecting a nice bargain only with 150 innings pitched. He could be more. So the production per inning pitched is excellent, and you get the value of the replacement level on top of that. So I kind of like him more for that. And the third thing I'm going to say is, reminds me the way you describe him is Marco Gonzalez. Incredibly consistent.
Oh, man.
Half-half, but he always ends up getting somewhere in the middle for a good ratio, and he ends up pitching a lot of wins. He had 19 wins in 2019, 13 wins in 2018. This is Marco Gonzalez. Marco Gonzalez was a $20 pitcher last year. This is the kind of guy that he won't be great, but he'll end up getting the $10 value year in, year out, or at least high 7s, 8s, 9s. But what I'm saying is he's going in the 18th round. He's a lot better than an 18th round pitcher. He's not a number 7 starter on your club. He has the potential, and that's where he's going now. So for the price and everything, I'm okay with some of the inconsistencies. And of course, he might be one of the guys that you sit half the time. Maybe if you want to use him that way. I like him. I'm not worried about the inconsistency because I think he's a guy like Marco Gonzalez that he'll even out, and you'll be happy if you just stuck with him the whole year.
So 2 quick points here. First of all, Marco Gonzalez, do not get me started on Marco Gonzalez, but I do recognize 15-teamers. Marco Gonzalez certainly is valuable. I would say in a 12-teamer, guy that's probably going to hover like a 4 ERA and a questionable whip isn't necessarily something that you want to go and get. You can kind of find it through the year on the waiver wire, but all right, there's a chance that Marco Gonzalez is somehow able to repeat 2020. So, okay, I get that part. The other thing is you have him projected, let's say, 150 innings, right? 152. This is something I talked a lot about last year. If you notice, I have a lot of terms for things because I like terms. I think they're fun, and there's a lot of different mindsets you have. And one is, well, what we call a hipster, a headache-inducing pitcher that stifles the entire roster. And what they do is, I was saying this for Lance McCullers last year. Well, Lance McCullers, we only projected 140 innings or so because he was coming off of Tommy John. When is he getting them? Is it going to be 4 months straight and then they shut down Eduardo Rodriguez? Probably not, right? It's going to be the entire year, but maybe it's a skip start over here, or he's getting pulled after 5 innings instead of going off to 6 or so on. And you have to. I noticed you mentioned like a replacement player. Are you going to get a replacement player? Because you might have to hold him through the full year to get that 150.
But again, it's about the understanding of projections, how they're formed. I think that the 152 is not because you think he's going to be start here, miss a start here. I think it's just more the binary. Is he going to pitch or is he not going to pitch? We don't know it, so we'll just project something in the middle. It's different than Kershaw, who's going to get hurt at a certain point, and he will come back, and you'll get that there. I think it's just a question of Rodriguez, is he going to have it or not, and projections are just conservative.
Interesting.
Right?
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how many innings I project for Eduardo. I can see the Red Sox being careful to some degree after his health concerns and the fact that, we talk about guys opting out in 2020, but thinking that they're still practicing and everything. Eduardo wasn't. Eduardo was recovering. So I wonder if has the stamina to go very long. I legitimately have no idea how many innings I'm projecting or envisioning for Eduardo.
Again, you got to check spring training for him. To me,
sure. Great point.
and you'll know right away. You'll know right away if it's working or not. I think with him. But here's the chance to get in at a potential bargain here. And it's the 17th round. It's not the end of the world if you had to cut him. How about this guy Ryan Yarbrough? We talked about earlier why we picking Rays, but he comes out as a nice, small $2-3-ish bargain here, according to ATC. My problem with him is that he averages less than 5 innings per start, but I could have just said he's on the Rays, and you would know that. You cannot count on wins. He happened to have gotten 16 wins in 2018. That's interesting. His strikeouts are 7 K per 9 is 20% strikeout rate, which is interesting because his swinging strike rate is somewhere between 10 and 13% over the last couple of years, so you would think he would have more strikeouts. Now, he has a pretty good ground ball rate. We're talking over 40% ground ball rate and a low walk rate. So maybe it's possible that he likes to induce contact, so instead of putting the put-away pitch, his put-away pitch is to induce an out, and that's how he's successful. I'll let you talk to that, Nick, but I like him as a pitcher. He's a great stabilizer of ratios. You'll get something for I'm projecting 423, but he's shown every year to be even better than that. Whip pretty decent, 1-2 or so. He's going 17th round. I think his profile is somewhat like Sean Manaea's, and again, I'm one of those guys who like the ratios, who like the stability of his projection. And, when you put together Yarbrough, Manaea, you put together Eduardo Rodriguez, who's going about the same round, maybe Urquidy is going a little bit earlier, but close, you have what we call in the show a hot spot, where there's 5-6 pitchers around the same round late-ish, that it's not about taking somebody at that spot. You're going to get somebody even a round or two later. So just be aware of the pocket of undervalued players in the spot. You may not get any one of them. Maybe somebody loves Jose Urquidy, somebody loves Andrew Heaney, But again, it's an ADP. So if 3 people are higher, that means 3 people are going to have to be even lower, and that means even a bigger bargain. So I like Ryan Yarbrough for the ratios. I don't need that strikeout guy. I don't need the Chris Archer type. That's how I like to play. Let's go to Nick first. What do you think first about the fact that his swing strike rate is high, but his strikeout rate is low? Is my explanation correct in your mind?
I mean, I think it's because it was 56 innings. And Yarbrough has unfortunately not been. I mean, I think this is finally the year that the Rays say, okay, fine, you get to start all the time. No more of this opener stuff. Like, you get to start. I'm crossing my fingers as I say that, but they need someone else outside of Glasnow to do that, right? Please let it be the Fratty Pirate. Please let Yarbrough do that.
The
And
Pirate.
I think he's kind of like Kyle Hendricks in some ways, of a potential to go 6-7. There was actually a stretch. It's kind of funny to me. It's so Rays. He had 4 starts in a row in 2019 that were at least 6 innings. 2 of them were 7. But of course, after the first one of like 7.1 innings, he then came in relief for 3.2 until he went and did the other ones again, because he's a part of the Rays. But he has that potential. It's a cutter and a changeup that effectively misses the barrel. That's what they do. And it's not fast. It doesn't look pretty. It's part of the Chad Bradford experience of not looking like your conventional starter. So I think people overlook Yarbrough a little bit. But I imagine that Yarbrough is a very cheap entity entering this year. And he hasn't put a whip of 130 or higher in his career. Last 2 years combined are about a 115. It was a 1 whip in 2019 and 119 in 2020. Strikeout rate is probably going to be around 20%. But if you expect a 125 whip and 4 ERA, I mean, great. I'm stoked about that from Yarbrough. Sure, it might be a little headache inducing about, is he starting? How long is he going necessarily? But as far as the other guys around him, volume shouldn't be much of an issue. It should be like 160, 170 maybe. As they keep relying on him this season. Just don't expect like a 25% K rate and you're fine.
Yeah, he had 1 win last year. 1. Ruven,
Whatever.
thoughts on the what is he the
Fratty Pirate. He's saying yar, bruh.
I love that.
Well, you're talking about the innings. He started a total, I think, 9 games last year. He had 11 appearances. Of those 9 games, he did go 5 or more innings, 6 out of the 9. And one of those starts, he was coming off an injury. That's why he only pitched 3 innings. So I think they're trying to trend him up. He does have, on average, about 140 innings pitched per season. So there's no reason to doubt that he can do 150, maybe even 160 if the Rays will allow it. He is one of the 3, I would say, true starters who are healthy right now. He's of the top 3 of the 3-headed monster of, I guess when I call it 3-headed monster of Glasnow, Archer and Yarbrough. Like 3-headed monster, I don't know. And another guy we're going to mention right after this, a rookie coming up. I think next one we're going to talk about, Josh Fleming. He's going to have even less innings than Yarbrough. So if you want to trust one of these guys, Yarbrough will be that ERA and whip stabilizer that you can afford to have on your team so that you can throw those 2-star pitchers in later to get those strikeouts and not have to worry about the ERA and whip.
Josh Fleming, you mentioned here, ATC usually isn't very high on guys with not that much experience, yet it's showing as a $3 player, and he's going in the 30th round of NFBC drafts, so we're talking like the last bench player. Maybe he's not even taken in them. He's going pick 442. I'll start with you, Nick. Any thoughts on a guy who had 64% ground ball rate and pretty high ground ball rate in the minors? What do you think?
I mean, Josh Fleming, I have such an affinity for Josh Fleming because I love to see guys who can throw, who have amazing pitch separation. Fleming is able to put his cutter glove side all the time and then put his sinker arm side all the time. He's a lefty. I remember when he came up, and I think it was the second start of the season was against Miami, had 6 strikeouts, and I was like, okay, I'm going to take a look at this. And it's glorious. You see the strike zone plot. Literally, it's just yellow on one side and orange on the other. He's just so good at that. But I don't think the Rays are going to let him be like a 6-inning guy. This is the guy that will get opened all the time. And they'll be happy to get like 4 good innings, 4 or 5 out of Josh Fleming, who's able to just go sliders glove side, sinker's arm side, and that's kind of it. He calls it a day. So I don't think that's someone you want to chase. I don't think it's something that speaks to enough of a ceiling in a 12 teamer for you to go after a 15 teamer. I think you're still going to be wanting more out of that roster spot than what Josh Fleming's going to give you. But I don't know. I kind of dig it. I really hope it works. I hope he can just do those two things like clockwork and have success. It's just, yeah, he's on the Rays. He's not going to get the proper opportunity you want.
I have him down for 120 innings. So, I mean, if he gets 140 innings, he could be worth $7. I have him as a $3 player. There's upside here, no doubt. Ruben?
Josh Fleming's last start of the season, he had a career high 6 inning game. He had a career high 90 pitches. That's his career high. They have to, if they're going to compete and they see in the AL East and they see that he's able to pitch against the AL East and actually do well against them, you know what? They have to pull back a little bit. I know I'm still upset about them pulling Blake Snell because he was pitching such a good game, but sometimes you do analytics to the point where you shoot yourself in the foot. And this is a point where, you know what? If you have a window to win, they have a window to win. They have to take it. Josh Fleming is right now the number 5 starter, and you know what? If you have a last pick and you need a pitcher, he's the guy to take because you know what? He's going to be on a good team. He's going to get you some wins. He may not pitch that much, but his ERA is not going to kill you. His whip is not going to kill you. And you know what? There's a chance that he may turn out to be the number 4 starter on the team. And you know what? The number 4 starter on the team on the Rays is a lot better than the number 4 starter team on most other teams in baseball. So I would take that.
I do want to mention one thing here. That final start of the year, 6 innings, 5 strikeouts against the Phillies. That was on the last day of the regular season, and Fleming was not on the ALDS roster. So the Rays just kind of were like, all right, go ahead, Fleming. Go 90 pitches. We're not going to micromanage you today. You're doing great. Sure. Well, the entire bullpen could use some rest. You don't need to be saved up for anything else. Just go ahead. So I do worry. I want that to be the thing consistently. But I have some hesitation leaning on that.
Very good point. The ground ball rate, though, means he might be an effective pitcher in terms of sorry, not effective, efficient. Efficient meaning a few pitches per inning because he's generating all the ground balls. So maybe he lasts a little bit longer than you might think. But yeah, that's a good point about the fact that he really isn't on the postseason roster there. Didn't realize that. Yeah, let's wait and see with these guys. But more importantly, Nick, you need a nickname for Josh Fleming. Flaming Flem.
I do. Oh man, I don't want to give him a nickname yet because it can go 2 different ways, and I want it to be the good way.
Okay, got it.
Fosh Gemming. There we go. Let's go with that.
Fosh Gemming. All right.
Because he's pitching well. He's gemming.
Just like Jarek Dieter, right?
There it is.
All right, we'll do a couple of mailbag questions here. The first 2 are very similar to each other, so I'll just read them back to back. Jared asks, do reports of the deadened ball in 2021 make later round flyball pitchers like Boyd and Ray more interesting than they would have been before the news? Also, Nick asks, with the news of the MLB deadening the ball, are you moving pitching up or down in general? I feel like hitting should be moved up since there may not be as big a gap between the tiers of starting pitchers anymore. 2 pretty good questions. We didn't talk about it earlier. You hinted at it earlier, but yeah, we're getting reports that the ball could be deadened, which means that balls won't travel as far. Some people are going to be hitting fewer homers, which means that pitchers might be better because the balls will be caught. Thoughts on this, Nick?
We have no idea, and it's hard to make any sort of adjustments based on it. I like the idea of fewer home runs because I inherently root for the pitcher. I feel like hitters can just be cardboard cutouts, just sitting there in the plate, whatever. Don't care about you. It's all about the pitcher. So fewer home runs means more good things happen to my guys. But yeah, that's a good point. But hey, Matthew Boyd, that was a huge home run problem. Same with Robbie Ray. Well, with Boyd, I think I'd put more weight on the fact that he was injured through last year and he didn't really have a slider. That was his major pitch for ages. And with Robbie Ray, well, he had a new arm circle, and then he reverted from that new arm circle that made us excited but then it didn't work, so he reverted it when he got to Toronto. And I think those factors are a larger weight it could make a difference. And I think it's a good point saying, oh, if there are fewer home runs, how does it change the landscape? Probably the guys that are de facto home run hitters actually get a boost because you'll see fewer wall scrapers, essentially. Um, but honestly, I'm not really making any drastic changes. I think it's something that we just don't know how to wait, and we don't know how it's going to affect things. So I wouldn't really use that over all the other information that we have already.
Yeah, I agree. It's very hard to discern right now. I will say you'll know very quickly. We're talking about just like a week or two into the season whether the dead end ball has an effect and what it is, and you'll be able to make changes there. But it's really hard to know what the story is. I think that whether there's a DH in the National League or not, that's going to have a much bigger effect. You're going to see National League ERAs could be a difference of a half a point for pitchers. That's much more important to me than the dead end balls. Now, as to the point as to whether you should be moving pitching up or down, I don't think so. I think that unless you can discern a real relativity between pitchers, and I think the relativities are more on the hitter side than the pitcher side. Again, if your whole league is not changing the values of pitchers, if you're suddenly changing the value of the pitchers, you're not doing anything because all you're doing is saying that I'm valuing hitting more, so you'll be better in hitting and you'll be worse in pitching because you're going to acquire fewer pitchers. I don't think it should make any difference in terms of what you do, hitters versus pitchers. Ruben?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to make a difference either where you should take them. I mean, when you're comparing like Boyd and Ray, all I care about in Boyd and Ray are their strikeout rates. Last year, Boyd had like only like close to an 8.95, which is low for him. Ray, he still was getting those strikeouts. But you know what? For both of them, their home run for fly ball rate didn't really go up that much the last couple of seasons. So it's not like they were giving up more home runs. It's that they were having less swings and misses, in my opinion. Now, as of whether they're actually going to do this, I think it's not in the interest of baseball to do this because the home runs are sexy, offense is sexy, and if they want more people to watch baseball, they're going to keep the offense the way it is. They have a better chance of changing something if they want to maybe move the mound back or raise the mound or something like that. But deadening the balls, the players today are bigger and stronger than they were a couple of years ago, and just deadening the ball is not going to do that much. So what? Instead of hitting it 450 feet, you're going to hit it 420 feet. It's still going to be a home run, and a lot of these guys it's still going to be a home run. So that's my opinion.
I mean, for some of those, but for the ones who have a much lower average fly ball distance, I think it could make the difference could be 20%, 30% of their homers. Depends who you are, right? Stanton's not going to affect.
Again, baseball wants offense. That's how they bring quote unquote fans to the seats. That's how they get people to watch. And you know what? It's in the best interest of baseball not to do this. Actually,
maybe. I kind of think baseball wants it. I kind of think they want more balls in play. But the problem, though, with the deadening ball is, you're solving the homer problem. You're putting more balls in play, but you're not solving there's too many strikeouts and walks in the game, right? The problem is that you want batters not to strike out. The shift. You're not doing anything. People are just going to pile up on you on one side, right? Thoughts on this?
Or hopefully you could just beat the shift.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's what I was
right.
going to say, but you beat me to it. Yes.
There you go.
I knew it was in there, Ravain.
Yeah.
All right. It's getting late here, so we'll do one more question from Jacob. He says, I had to pay $42 for Bueller last season just to get that one ace. He plays in an auction league. Is there a point now with the supply and demand of ace starting pitcher that you're just tapping out? Or should you go all in to get that anchor starting pitcher? My league has a few heavy spenders in it. It's a 5x5 head-to-head league. So the question here, I think, Nick, is, when is enough too much? Like, yes, people are paying more, and yes, you should pay more than in the past, but, are you paying $50 for a starting pitcher in a standard 5x5 league? Like, when is the point where you say, the heck with it? I don't need that ace. Let's just let the people pay that much.
I mean, you know me. I'm not gonna pay $50 for Shane Bieber. I'm gonna wait on the guys that I like. I am in the camp that the discount starters, if you just go after those, you can formulate an amazing rotation. If you go for the guys that are generally ranked around 10 to 30, 35. I mean, I can extend that to 40. But in an auction league, I mean, you can really, like, if you're spending $50 on a Bieber, you can get, three guys instead for that cost or so that will be amazing for you. I would much rather go that route instead.
Right. Ruvain?
I actually think that those players, the top pitchers, could be worth it. I mean, just look at last year. According to the ATC calculations, Shane Bieber was worth 48 last year. Okay, Yu Darvish was worth 37. You have Degrom was only worth 28. And Cole is only 29. But over a course of a full season, they may have hit a higher level. Trevor Bauer on the Reds was worth 41 last year. So the pitchers at the higher level, they do have the opportunity to make their value. Is it the right thing? Not necessarily, because pitchers are very different creatures than hitters, and what you're going to get one year, you're not going to get it enough from another. Some people could predict that Yu Darvish was going to step up to the way he was, but who could have predicted a pitcher who had a career ERA in the fours would turn into a 40-year $1 million contract for the Dodgers? You just can't predict that. If something turns on, you don't necessarily need to have that $42 pitcher. You can get that middle tier pitcher. You can get that Kenta Maeda, who was worth $33 last year. Get him a lot cheaper, and you can still have a profit there.
Yeah, so I'll tell you this, Jacob, asking the question here. My research has shown that getting that high-priced pitcher has been a pretty good return on investment over the time, where a lot of pitchers in the middle rounds really don't return their value. Here's the thing. It really depends on what the market does. If you have players in your league where the pitchers are going $40, but the next tier of pitchers are going in the 30s, you're better off spending the 40 to get that extra bump rather than taking a low-end starting one pitcher in the 30s. If your league doesn't pay a lot for pitching in general, and you can get those guys, as Nick was talking about, paying $15, $20, $24, and you don't have to jump into a high thing and where you can get a nice quantity, then no, you don't want to pay the top. So there's no be-all, end-all answer, really. It's not a cop-out to tell you that there's no one answer and that there's no limit, but it really depends on what everybody else is doing, right? If everybody's paying $40 for a pitcher, you are better off paying the extra $3 for it, right? Again, it's all pricing relative. If you don't and everybody's getting good pitching, well, you're left with no pitching, right? You're going to come up with the ends and the scraps. So again, you want to pay better relative to everybody else. You want to get a bargain on people, and it really matters what everybody else is doing. So again, in an auction, you don't have to throw out people at the top. You can throw out people in a different tier, and I recommend doing that. Throw out somebody that you're interested in a second tier, in a third tier. See how the prices are going in the market. When you do that, you'll get information about how the market is playing, and you'll know, okay, if I throw out an SP2 and, people are overpaying for SP2, you can throw more money out on an SP1. If you see the bargain is present right there in the SP2, just grab that, and then you don't have to pay the SP1 price if they're going ridiculous. So, a lot of it has to do with you very quickly gauging what the market is in an auction, and you do that by ordering your nominations correctly. Hope that's good advice for you. All right, well, that is the end of our show. This was a good one. I feel like we had Nick coming from a different perspective than us in some ways, but the wealth of information you have analyzing pitchers, knowing what they throw and what works and not is just invaluable, and that makes you one of the top experts in this industry. So thank you for coming on the show, Nick.
Wow, that is some ridiculous praise that I do not deserve. Thank you so much for having me here. And I mean, you guys do amazing work. Ariel, of course, again, congratulations. Baseball article of the year. Amazing.
Yes. Thank you very much. Yes.
Really, really well deserved, of course. It's great being here. Hope you enjoy 6.0. I think you will. I know that's my bold prediction for 2021. I think you're going to enjoy Pitcherless 6.0.
Yes, definitely. And you can follow Nick on Twitter at Pitcherlist. That makes it pretty convenient, right?
There we go. Right, not too bad.
There you go. Other than 6.0 and PitchCon, do we miss anything else that's going on? It sounds like quite a bit, actually.
Yeah, it's a lot. I'll be doing a lot of Twitch streaming. So go to twitch.tv/pitcherlist, and especially in season, if you want to ask me questions and see the process at work, well, you know where to find me.
Very cool. Ruvain?
You can follow me on Twitter at MLB Injury Guru, where I tweet out the injury updates. My first weekly article actually came out this past week from Rotoballer discussing the injuries. And I actually want to back up one thing. I want to apologize to Rafael Devers and Xander Bogaerts. I think they have a better chance of making the All-Star team than Eduardo Rodriguez.
There you go. All right. And again, I'm Ariel Cohen. You can follow me on Twitter at ATCNY. Check out my new article on Fangraphs today about interprojectional volatility. You will be very happy that you did. The ATC projections are on Fangraphs. They are on Rotoballer. They are on RotoChamp and on Sportsline. We're getting everywhere. The best projections in the business, so says me. And of course, you can listen to me right here every week on the Beat the Shift podcast. There we go. All right. Once again, many thanks for Nick Pollack from Pitcher List for joining us on the show, and from all of us here at Beat the Shift. See you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.